Welcome back to Horns Eye Studios for another episode of 666 Seconds of Murder. That means each one of these videos is less than 666 seconds or 11 minutes and 6 seconds. So no time to waste. Let's get right to it. But before we do, if you don't mind, please hit that like button and drop a comment below. It really helps the video get out there to more people just like you. So I appreciate it. And if you're not a subscriber, please do that before you leave if you like what you see, and it helps the channel grow. So thank you. It is important, though, to remember that this video is for informational purposes only. These are just my opinions and speculation. I'm not an expert, but I'm just using some good common sense to talk about this case. And I'm not saying anyone's guilty of anything. All of what I say is alleged. All right. So for this episode, I'd like to discuss the Idaho 4 case and the issue of that touch DNA. Now, I have done multiple videos about that topic. I did a True Crime Deep Cuts on it. I feel I understand it pretty well. Now, I know that some people, when they hear the word DNA, they're running the other way, okay? Because the science, it gets to be a bit much depending on who you watch and all that. I don't do that, okay? I'm a high school graduate. That's it, okay? I break it down in the simplest of terms so all of us that aren't biologists can understand it, all right? Now, I'm not going to talk much about the knife sheath and Brian Kohberger in this video. I'm going to talk about somebody else, somebody you probably never heard of before, and that's Lucas Anderson. And if you're going to look up anything on Lucas, it's L-U-K-I-S, Anderson. Now, I bet most of you have no idea who that guy is or anything about his 2012 case involving touch or transfer DNA, or how it nearly got him a room on death row for a crime that he didn't commit. Now, thankfully, his alert public defender, Kelly Kulik, I mean, a round of applause for her. She was able to get that noose from around his neck in time and figured out that it was a case of touch DNA, and a great example of why so many feel it is not scientifically legit. Now, Lucas Anderson was a homeless 26-year-old man living on the streets of San Jose, California. He was an alcoholic with an extensive criminal record. So when the 66-year-old Ravish Kumra was found passed away in his home in Monte Sereno, law enforcement was working on this crime using the most modern technology they had at the time. Again, this is 12 years ago, so keep that in mind. Now, November 29th of 2012, a group of men broke into this 7,000 square foot mansion where he lived, and he was bound and gagged, and then they gagged him with duct tape. They found a female companion of his in the house and tied her up next to him, but did not put the duct tape over her mouth, but beat her repeatedly. Then they went through the house going for cash and jewelry and whatever other valuables they could take. The female was able to get herself eventually to the phone to call 911 after they left. Paramedics declared Ravish had passed, and it was discovered that it was duct tape over his mouth that suffocated him. So absolutely horrible, horrible. Now, 3.5 weeks later, Lucas Anderson gets picked up and informed that his DNA was on Ravish's fingernail. That's not good, but it was touch DNA, also known as transfer DNA. That means skin cells, not blood, not saliva, not any bodily fluid. There's a million ways that Lucas's skin cells could have ended up there. But since they were on a victim, things definitely looked grim, especially the fingernails, right? But his lawyer found hospital records that showed Lucas was picked up earlier that night of this crime and admitted to the hospital by paramedics or transferred to the hospital by paramedics and admitted into detox where he was monitored. So a very solid alibi. Now, of course, law enforcement trying to figure this thing out of how that touch DNA ended up on the victim's fingernail. Definitely curious, right? So originally, when DNA was first a thing, it had to be blood, saliva, semen, or a bodily fluid. But in 1997, an Australian forensic scientist, Roland van Oorschot, wrote a paper about DNA fingerprints and how touch DNA could be useful. He called it secondary transfer. And his article goes into the idea that DNA could be left behind even if a person was never there, brought in by someone or something into the scene. And there are many who have doubts about law enforcement using it as evidence against the defendant. But in Australia, if the touch DNA is on a transferable item, such as a soda can that's found at the scene or a knife sheath on a bed, then that's something they can't use in court. And it's only a tool to help law enforcement, just kind of like a lie detector test is. Nothing more than that. Bicca Barlow, who's a world-renowned expert on the subject, testified in the grand jury at the Idaho 4 of the same thing, that it shouldn't be used as evidence in court. The U.S. military doesn't allow it. Most countries in Europe don't allow it either if it's transfer or touch DNA. Now, luckily, in the case of Lucas Anderson, his attorney was able to get the charges dismissed, and they found two other guys that were guilty of the crime. A sharp detective figured out the same two paramedics had arrived on the scene to the passed out Lucas. He was in a public place, passed out. Those paramedics that worked on him and transported him to the hospital were the same two paramedics that were there at Ravish's mansion, treating him, seeing if he was still alive. And the protocol says, when they use that pulse ox on your finger or anything, that they're supposed to clean and disinfect it. But the pulse ox was used in both cases. And so that's how they logically figured those skin cells ended up on his fingernail, was from their earlier call, which is kind of crazy, right? Now, I haven't heard anything about Lucas Anderson brought up in this Idaho 4 conversation, or anywhere for that matter, until one of my viewers did in the comments. And I wished I would have got the name, but I didn't. So if you're out there and remember leaving the comment, I really appreciate that. That was really good and very appropriate, I think, for this Idaho 4 discussion. I hope that Lucas was able to turn his life around, and I'm glad that he wasn't found guilty of something that he didn't do. Now, just like Lucas Anderson, Brian Kohberger could be found guilty because of this shaky evidence like this. People hear DNA and they just tune out, and they figure that's all you need. But think about that shirt maybe that you looked at while you were shopping, but then you set it back, it wasn't your size. But now your touch DNA is on it. And let's say somebody else buys the shirt and then unfortunately is attacked and deceased. So your DNA is on their shirt. And let's say you had some sort of criminal past, so your DNA is on file. Or maybe you were in the military. Or maybe you got a family member that joined one of those genealogy sites. That's how this kind of stuff happens. So is that what happened in the case of Brian Kohberger? I don't know. I mean, that's the kind of evidence that puts them on his trail, and I've got serious doubts about its validity. I honestly do, and I know most of you guys agree. Some of you don't, and that's okay. We can have a civil debate about the issue, all right? Now, don't miss my live this Sunday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Central. I'll be talking Idaho 4 with you guys, so I hope you join me for that. Working on a guest right now, nothing confirmed, but I'll let you know. And comment below what your thoughts. I always love to hear from you guys. And thank you very much to my friends in the Horns High Club. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate your support. And I appreciate all you guys that watch these videos with me. And we'll see you next time for another episode of 666 Seconds of Murder.